Vern, how are you doing?
I'm doing well, thanks. How about yourself?
Good.
Oh, well, I'm glad you made it.
Yeah. I'm glad things are picking back up for you and you're doing your meetings and hopefully moving on here.
Yep, indeed, we are.
Have you seen a slowdown because of the new things in COVID?
No, I really haven't.
You haven't. That's a good thing.
Yeah, I think
Some providers want out and then new ones want in, change of ownership type of thing.
exactly. Yeah,
Yeah, good.
there's movement in both directions.
Well, and that's positive on all sides because I'm working with some new owners that have such a fresh outlook of what they want, you know,
That's great.
not burnout and then I'm tired. And so there's good on all aspects. We just have to get the new owners up to snuff of what's expected. So that's my
Right.
get them up and running well. But some of the old owners were just checked out.
Who's not burned out?
Hi, what's up?
Hello.
How are you?
Good. I don't even know what that means.
Burned out?
I'm almost there 24/7. I don't know what burnout means. So
Yeah, that's hard. I mean, I know operators that are, you know, working shifts, their staff's out sick. I mean, it's hard.
yeah. When you're short staff and then they call out sick and
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. I did attend a meeting the other day on how to get staff. And they said within 48 hours of posting your ad, the people that replied have a different job. They are getting hired. So long gone the days of 2 and 3 interviews. You contact them online, you do an interview, you hire them. You know?
All right, I'm going to move this along. It is 7:30 and I try to stay somewhat on point here. So now we're going to go through our sponsors. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
All right. Okay, so let's see if I can do this right. Always, Gene Greeno's the guy that got me involved in this. He passed away at the end of last year, so always give a salute to Gene. Our website is DAALR.com. So if you go to that website, key links is the first page you want to go to. And on that tab, if you're in Colorado and looking to do an assisted living, these are the 2 links that you need to pay very close attention to. This is the Chapter 7 and the Chapter 2. These are all the rules and regulations that you need to know to do this business in Colorado. There's probably something similar in some of those other states, but I don't have direct access to that. But if you're in Colorado, definitely go to our website and take a look at that information. We have a lot of other helpful information on this. We've also got our Facebook page, Denver ALR. I encourage everybody to join this page. This is our social networking platform, so it's a place to ask questions of the group, or you know, if you got something you're trying to get rid of, or you're looking to hire, or whatever it is, just this is a good place to be. So please join our Facebook page, Denver ALR. Also, our meetup. We thank everybody that was able to sign up through Meetup. That's more helpful when we have a restaurant that we're going to, so that we can give them an idea of what our attendance is. But if you went through there, we appreciate it. And we also send out all of our emails through this platform as well. And if we take a look at our sponsors, we've got half a dozen sponsors that help us out. First one is the RAL National Association. We actually are fortunate tonight to have the president of this association with us, Mr. Brian Pinkowski. Brian, would you like to say a few words?
I would. I can give you guys an update on a couple things that we are doing at the National Association. One of which is that we are lobbying to get onto the National Fire Protection Association Healthcare Committee and Egress and Exit Committee, so that we can have some influence on how the National Fire Protection Association puts out the rules that affect this industry. The National Association's got approximately 50,000 plus members, and I don't know how many homes it is, over like 26,000 homes that we represent, lots and lots of residents. So it's an important group of people to protect, such as yourselves. We're also working with the International Commercial Code group, which is the ones who produce the International Building Code, the International Residential Code, the International Fire Code. And so we're working with those committees right now as well to look out for the interest of our community, because they also don't understand the residential model very well. And as an ongoing matter, we're looking at other things like the Facility Guidelines Institute. We had good success with them over the last couple of years, and we're doing ongoing studies. So for example, we're looking at the impact of traffic, because of one of the complaints that people will have if they choose to try and make noise about opposing your RAL project is they'll say, oh, it's going to be too much traffic. So we've got some traffic data, and we're working with the Institute of Traffic Engineers on that data to help influence that in a positive direction as well. So that's kind of a large bit of information about us, but that's what we've been doing.
Fantastic. Thank you, Brian. I encourage everybody to join that group. We do have strength in numbers, and these guys have certainly proven that. Next, we have the RAL Academy. If you are interested in learning about assisted living, then on our website, you'll see a link over here for RAL, and that will take you to the Residential Assisted Living Academy. This is out of Phoenix, Arizona. This is a group that Gene Greeno had started up, and it's a great place to learn. They will be able to teach you most of the things that you need to know about the business. So if you're getting started and you need some help, this is the place to go. I think we have a few people here that have actually been through this academy and have had great success. So congratulations to them. Next, we have Anderson Legal, Business, and Tax Advisors. These guys are great, especially for reviewing your taxes and finding ways to reduce what you pay. And our speaker tonight, Jason Zundel, is from Anderson, and he's going to talk about asset protection. So I'll let him talk a little bit more about what they do during his presentation. Next, we have assisted living marketing. I don't see Peter tonight, but he regularly attends these. And Peter builds websites, and he does a fantastic job. He specializes in the assisted living, but he also does it for other businesses. I actually have him working on my website for Grand Avenue Brokers. He did our dollar site. He did my wife's business website. He's been absolutely great to work with and has always been very, very responsive, which is kind of unusual for IT guys I've dealt with in the past. So assistedlivingmarketing.com is how to reach his company. And next we have Pinkowski Law, and Brian spoke a little bit about some of the things that they can help with, but I'll let him expand on that.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I'll say that we're also now in Arizona. So we're Colorado and Arizona, which is a good thing for us to say. There's a lot of homes in Arizona. And what we do, in addition to corporate formation stuff, is that we handle the triangle of things that affect your ability to get into the market. There's the purchase of the real estate, there's the asset purchase agreement of the business, and then there's the licensing. So handling that relationship of those three things and helping you overcome barriers to get into business as fast as possible is what we do.
Fantastic. Thank you, Brian.
You bet.
Where these guys have been super, super helpful for the people that I know is dealing with the fair housing laws and dealing with HOAs or expanding the number of beds that you have. You know, that is a great, great asset right there. When you run into these people that say you can't, you give Michelle and Brian a call and they will tell you how you can.
Absolutely right. And we do that all over the United States. While we have offices in Arizona and Colorado, we do Fair Housing Act work all across the United States.
They are your secret weapon. Okay, next I'll talk a little bit about our group, Grand Avenue Business Brokers, Add a Better Way Realty. We help people buy and sell assisted living. So if you are interested in getting into this business or getting out of it, we can help you with that. We've done over 30 deals of assisted living. And also we work with the Better Way Funding, and we happen to have Jim Flint here tonight. One of those rare occasions that Jim joins our group. Jim is the broker that I work for, and he manages a Better Way Funding. Jim, would you like to chat a little bit about that?
Sure. We were doing this business before we met Vern, but certainly Vern's been a great addition to the company because of all his contacts. But we started around 15 years ago with one guy that wanted to remodel a house, and then he was leasing it from us, and then wanted to buy it from us at a later date once he got it filled up, and it worked out really well. So the best thing we can do for people is to help them buy a property that maybe a bank doesn't want a loan on because it has a poor operating history. And then you come in and we'll buy it. And obviously, the seller gets 100% of the cash. You lease it from us, and we have a ramp up period for the lease because usually it's not doing too well and you need a few months to get it going. And then you have an option to buy it from us at a slight markup over what we paid for it, because we've got loan fees and other fees we got to pay. But the big increase comes in from when you are able to fill it up and improve the business. And then we've got one of our operators is buying 2 properties from us this month. And because he's increased the value so much, he doesn't need to come with any money to the closing table. So the value was high enough that showed that our option price was equal to the loan amount. And that's really what we want to do, is help people move from just a management situation, but have the experience and knowledge to run these assisted living places and get you in a position of ownership of a property. And so we look forward to your inquiries, and you can talk to Vern or myself. We have Vern's got a website to download some basic information, so we know generally what we're talking about. And as I mentioned, we're selling a couple of the properties, so we've got plenty of money to allocate to some new properties. So thanks, Vern.
You bet. Thank you, Jim. And I'm putting that website into the chat here. So if you have any questions, you can check it out. Okay, and recent activity, we just actually sold and bought a 48 bed and then 5 8-bed homes. In that case, it was an existing operator that wanted to cash out some of the equity. So he walked away with about $1.5 million of cash to grow his business. So yet he still maintains and runs these. So that's a way, if you're an existing operator, that you might use our service. We have a 43-bed listing available in Grand Junction. We've got a 9-bedroom house under contract in Centennial. We also have an 8-bedroom in there that I missed putting on there. There is available a 9-bedroom in Arvada, although I think that's Lakewood. That would be Mitch. And then there's a 15-bed available in North Denver, and coming up is a 12-bed in the North Metro area. If you have any questions about these, if you're interested in any of these products, please give me a call. So next, we'd like to hear from CALA, the Colorado Association of Assisted Living, Colorado Assisted Living Association, and Janet Cornell is here to give us some news.
Right, thanks for that, Vern. Colorado Assisted Living Association supports the assisted living industry in Colorado. We tend to specialize a little bit more in small group homes. We've grown a lot in the last couple of years, and we're looking forward to some more opportunities to do some education with small group homes and work collaboratively with the state health department to provide some avenues to run these homes.
Thanks, Janet. And is there a trade show coming up in February that everybody?
There is. I'm sorry. There's a trade show coming up on February 10th and 11th. It's at the Westin Hotel. It's a collaborative effort with us and GDPRA and Mavericks and Senior Care. We have a loaded venue of speakers. And so if you want to sign up with that, you can go to CALA's website and see where that's at and see the entire program.
Thanks for the update, Janet. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Vern.
Okay, so I think we're about ready to introduce Jordan Zundel. Jordan is with Anderson Advisors, and he's here to talk about asset protection. Jordan, would you like to take the screen? And you're muted, Jordan. Oh, there you go.
Thank you so much, Vern. I appreciate it. I'm Jason Zundel with Anderson Business Advisors. Really excited to be with everybody today. Let me pull up this initial presentation. And like Vern said, today's topic is introduction to tax and asset protection. We've got about 45 minutes today, as I understand. And normally our introduction webinar lasts about 8 hours. So that gives you a little bit of perspective on the type and the amount of information that we like to talk about here. This will be kind of a high-level overview. I do like and generally try to leave open at least 15 minutes at the end so that we can go over specific questions, what your scenarios are. And I do that because that's what Anderson is. We are an educational firm as well as a legal services firm. It's what we do. We strongly believe that if you understand the basis of what we're doing and why we're doing it and how we're doing it, it makes it so much easier for you to actually benefit from it and be motivated to use it. You can read on the screen, we're the premier education company. We have professionals in all the different areas. We have EAs, we have CPAs, we have tax attorneys, we have asset protection attorneys, and those are barred across the United States, and we have clients across the United States. Tonight's presentation is tailored a little bit to the residential assisted living. Not sure why that's the case today, but our services are generally applicable across the board. We have small business owners, real estate investors, from flipping, rehabbing, wholesaling to long-term holds of long-term rentals and short-term rentals and kind of everything in between. We focus on the small to mid-size business owners for our tax and asset protection services. We also love and kind of have filled a niche where it's all in one place. Right? We are not only creating your entities, we're helping you maintain them. We're managing the taxes around them. We're helping you file those, stay on top of your corporate compliance, and make sure you're not breaching the corporate veil in the use. So again, that it is actually useful to you. I'm Jason Zundel. I am an attorney. I've been an attorney for about 10 years. I've been with Anderson for about a year and a half, but my entire tenure as an attorney has been focused on small businesses. Like one of our partners, Michael Bowman, I am a recovering litigator. I began my career in dispute resolution in the courtroom, outside the courtroom, mediations, and solving problems for small business owners of all types. And I began to see a pattern. I began to see that 95% of the issues that I was spending hours and months and years helping my clients overcome could have been solved by 20 minutes and $1,500 of legal services before the issue arose. And in my transition to Anderson, I've loved being able to provide that exact type of service so that so many of the big issues and problems that this litigation happy country that we are in can be resolved in the forefront. And so I'm excited to share a few of those today. I do have to apologize. I told Vern a little earlier and some of the earlier participants, I woke up this morning with a bit of a frog in the throat. It's given me this sexy growl that I'm speaking with today, but as long as it stays that way and doesn't turn into a puberty-esque event, I think we'll be all right. But please let me know either in chat or raising your hand if I'm not being clear enough and if you're not understanding well. And then the final point, as I mentioned, I love questions. Let's try to keep those to the chat. So as those questions come up, post them in the chat. We'll get through the presentation. Like I said, I'll try to reserve that at least 15 minutes, and I can start going back through those. And if I get through all of the questions in chat, then I feel like we have a small enough group that we can raise hands and actually have a little bit more direct interaction, which of course we love.
Jason, at the end of the meeting, I leave this open until everybody's gone. So if there's a lot of questions and you feel like hanging out and chatting with them at the end of the meeting too, we could do that. But feel free to, take as much time as you need right now.
Great. Oh, that's fantastic. I do have a little bit of flexibility. So that sounds great. Thanks for chiming in, Vern. All right, let's dive in. As I mentioned, Anderson is an education firm. I love this quote from Albert Einstein. If you cannot explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough. So often, especially in the legal field, you hear all sorts of acronyms and Latin terms and what technically sounds like English, but you don't understand what's going on. That's not what we're about. We don't use the heavy-handed, the high-minded. We try to focus on explanations and education that is useful. And therefore, we try to make our services exactly the same. And so today we're going to address several high-level, what we like to call big concepts, and then break those down in such a way that, oh yeah, this makes sense. This is what I need to do. And this is how I do it to make sure that I'm protecting my assets, that I'm minimizing my taxes while still being able to collect funding to be lendable and to make use of these properties and assets that I am developing. Let's start with the liability side. And so this is asset protection. Liability can come from anywhere these days. Welcome to America, where I think the latest statistic that I read was 60 to 70% of business owners will have at least one lawsuit filed against them during the course of their career. Almost 3/4 of business owners of all types and sizes. It's almost inevitable at this point. Liability can come in two forms. Again, high-level topics: inside liability and outside liability. So inside liability means it's generated within the individual or the entity's sphere of influence. Outside liability is liability that's coming from some other source. And our goal as asset protection attorneys is to insulate both ways. Let's talk about what this looks like real quick. If you've got 3 different homes and a car and a business, and they are all run under your personal name, any liability is going to be both inside and outside liability because it's going to affect everything, right? If you get in a car accident, all of your assets are at risk. If there's a fire at one of the homes that you own, all of your assets are at risk. Now let's look at that separation, which is the big concept that we're going to talk about first. Don't keep all your eggs in one basket, because if those are separated out properly into entities that provide that type of insulation, namely corporations, LLCs, some types of irrevocable trusts, then you can start to separate those out. And if we've got the house in an LLC, for example, and you get in a car wreck, well, that's personal liability. And so any assets you have in your personal name, that car accident, the plaintiff attorney is going to start sniffing around. He's going to look everywhere he can and find any assets in your name that he can attach that to. But when he looks at that business that you run, that's a business asset. That's separate. That outside liability can't come in and pierce the corporate veil, pierce into the inside of the LLC, so that your assets in there, that home, is protected from outside liability. Well, the reverse is also true. If we shift back to our original, there's a fire in the home, right? There's an accident, there's injury. Well, the plaintiff lawyer is going to start sniffing around. Oh, you own this. Let's see what else you have that we can attach to it. But in order to do so, they have to pierce that corporate veil from the inside. They can't go out of that unless you're commingling funds, unless you're treating the business entity as your own personal bank account, which is somewhat of a high standard and something that Anderson helps to make sure doesn't happen. So let's talk about some of those entities that can provide that level of separation. The two biggest types and most commonly used, most recommended, are corporations and LLCs. Corporations, which are divided up into C corporations or S corporations, are distinct from the owner and can help you avoid dealer status for those traders. And these are your tax mitigation vehicles, the corporations, right? They are publicly filed with the state. They are registered. They will have their own bank accounts. They're going to be kept as separate from you as possible. And this applies to both the corporations and the LLCs, right? The LLCs are a little bit more flexible, right? You have your choice of taxation. An LLC can be taxed as a C or S corporation. It doesn't have as many of the corporate formalities, the meeting minutes every quarter, the reports, the annual reports. And so you have a little bit more flexibility in how and where and when you run your business when you do so through an LLC as opposed to a corporation. But both of them provide an insular, I'm going to blame it on the frog in the throat. They separate you entirely from the both inside and outside liability, so long as you don't breach that corporate veil. This is one of those terms that's bandied about quite a bit by lawyers. So let's take a second to talk about what that means. The corporate veil is the layer of separation between your business entity and your personal finances. So if you have separate bank accounts, if whenever you pay yourself, it's pursuant to a services agreement or it's made as a member distribution with member minutes or some sort of writing, and then you maintain that corporate veil. The courts will invariably treat your entities as separate as you do. So the more you separate out your personal funds, if you're not using the corporate card to buy yourself McDonald's after a long day of caring for your residents, you're going to be okay. On the other hand, if you are taking your personal funds to buy the supplies to renovate your homes, to stock for the needs of your residents, right? You're not separating that veil. So you do need to, these LLCs, the entities provide separation as long as you're maintaining the corporate veil and those corporate formalities. All right, using the right tool for the right job. That's our next big concept. We talked about this in one of our breakout meetings. Well, there are so many entities out there. There are LLCs, there are trusts, there's corporations. Which one do I use and when? And that's one of the mantras, if you will, of Anderson Advisors, is that this shouldn't be a cookie cutter situation, right? If you have property in Colorado, you're going to protect that differently, and the structure may look different than if you have property in California. Even if you have a long-term rental in Colorado and a residential assisted living business in Colorado, that may look a little bit different and may be structured a little bit differently based on your needs and what else you have in your portfolio and how those businesses are run. We've talked about LLCs, we've talked about corporations, S&C corporations. So let's talk about some of the more common trusts that you're going to run into. The land trust is a revocable grantor trust. High level, all of them are revocable grantor trusts, which means you have the flexibility to amend them, to correct them, to completely rehaul or terminate them for so long as you are alive and the trustee. That's what we call a revocable grantor trust. They're revocable. You put your own assets into them, and you can adjust and take them out whenever. So you get the large benefit of flexibility. You get the benefits that we're going to talk about below, but they are not a separate entity because you can change them, because you put the assets into them. They're not going to provide that insular layer of protection from the inside and outside liability. So for asset protection, you usually need to pair the land trust, living trust, and the personal property trust. Land trusts are used for a specific item. As with LLCs that we'll talk about in just a little bit, you want one property in the land trust, right? It's going to make that property anonymous, get it out of your personal name. It's going to help, often we use it to help you avoid transfer taxes and fees, particularly true in Tennessee and California, Florida, for example. It ensures that there is no acceleration of the mortgage. It makes sure that it doesn't look like a transfer for the IRS, and is a more of a financial and anonymity tool than an asset protection tool. Personal property trust hold items that are not property, right? Land trust is for property. Personal property trust is for usually individual single uses. Can be multiple, but ideally single uses, like the land trust, for things other than property. We're talking other businesses, brokerage accounts, right? Investments. You can use them for trading accounts, for cryptocurrency, that sort of thing. And helps again with the anonymity, creating an anonymity shell, allowing you to use it to transfer it without triggering taxes for things other than real estate and property. And then the other of the more common trusts that you're going to run into are living trusts, often called revocable living trusts, family living trusts, lots of terms and combination of those family, revocable, and living within the title that you hear quite a bit. This one is for your estate planning needs, most especially to avoid probate, so that what you've built and what you've developed stays yours, right? It's not subject to a judge's whims based on what he had for lunch that morning. It's not a public process. Probate is so expensive and so time consuming. A short, uncontested probate can last 6 months up to a year. And then if it is contested, if it becomes ugly and nasty, 2 to 5 years, tens, sometimes even in the hundreds of thousands of dollars, expense-wise between all of the parties. And a living trust helps avoid all of that. It transitions based on your desires, based on your needs, and has the creativity and flexibility to be, rather than, okay, I died, let's spread it out. Okay, I died, but I also have a son with special needs. I have a daughter who has a drug addiction. And if I give her $1 million, she's not going to have $1 million tomorrow. Let's help her over the long run. Let's make payments. Let's make sure she's got a roof over her head and food, but not feed or facilitate that addiction, right? We've got the flexibility to make those kind of controlled decisions and not just leave it to a judge's whims, as I've mentioned. So a good asset protection plan is going to incorporate a little bit of all of these. So let's take a look at what that might look like. So we've got all of the different pieces here, right? Now, this is, again, this is a template. This is, if you will, the cookie cutter. Yours is going to look different. Yours is going to be tailored to your needs. But we've got a holding LLC for the limitation of liabilities. We've got individual LLCs, potentially land trusts, there in the green, for individual properties, right? We've got the red Indiana LLCs. That's the client I was working with last. Probably should have made it Colorado, but Indiana is cool too. It's a great place. And then you've got the corporation up here in yellow for the tax mitigation. Wyoming. Why Wyoming? Well, Wyoming is a bit of the trifecta that we of all of the things we like. First off, and most importantly, it is one of the 3 or 4 top states when it comes to asset protection laws, statutes, and judicial precedents. The only state with longer precedents is Delaware, but the top 3 or 4 are Delaware, Wyoming, Nevada, and actually a new kind of up and comer is South Dakota. They are really trending in that direction, and a state that we're keeping an eye on. All four of those states, though, are very heavily invested in protecting the business owner, protecting the landowner, protecting the rights of those that are creating jobs and that are working and that are investing. And it offers charging order protection, which means that instead of allowing a creditor to come in, I've got a judgment to you, you're gone. We're taking things, we're selling them at auction for 1/10 of the price. We are foreclosing on the properties. And as long as we get our money, we don't care what happens to the rest, right? A charging order protection means that they come in, they've won, right? They've got a judgment against you. You owe them $700,000. And whenever you pay yourself from the LLC, that's when they get paid. They can't force you to sell. They can't force you to liquidate. They can't force even the transfer of your rights to the LLC to them. They get paid when you get paid. And so don't pay yourself, or only pay yourself as an employee of that entity, which isn't a distribution and therefore isn't part of the charging order. Not allowed, right? It really, this charging order protection really puts you in the driver's seat. They have a judgment against you. They're going to have to negotiate with you, but now they have to negotiate with you rather than just being able to go in whole hog, grabbing everything that isn't nailed to the floor and throwing it at the sheriff for auction. Really, really strong protection. That's point number one. Point number two is that Wyoming is anonymous. We love this. We love this because we can create the LLC so that your name is nowhere in the public domain, right? Not as the manager, not as the owner. We can register it in a completely anonymous manner so that anybody looking at your assets, looking at your name, they don't see it. They don't see anything that is held through the Wyoming LLC because that's not attached to your name publicly. And a lot of our clients, even our clients, kind of don't understand the difference between anonymity and asset protection. Both are important. Both are very important. But the asset protection comes from the charging order protection and the LLC. You've got inside and outside a liability protection, as we've talked about. Anonymity is separate from that. And so there are times where, you know, that's going to get pierced. If you are in front of the judge at a deposition post-judgment, you're going to have to tell the court what assets you own, that you own this Wyoming holding. But they have to get to that point. They have to spend hours and days and years worth of attorney's fees to get a judgment against you when their initial search shows you've got nothing. There's nothing attached to your personal name. Well, any attorney worth their salt is going to look at that and they're going to turn around to their client and say, you're going to pay me more than I'm going to be able to get for you. Let's work with this insurance company. Let's settle and let's walk away with what we can get, rather than going through all that expense to find out, oh, they do have something. Oh, it's held in a Wyoming LLC. And unless they screwed up really badly, we're not going to be able to get to it anyway, right? Paired together, they are as strong asset protection as you can get. And then the third piece, the trifecta, as we say, Wyoming is a very reasonable price point for both registering and renewing their entities. Delaware, Nevada, you're looking at hundreds of dollars per year in registration fees, annual fees, taxes, etc. Wyoming, they did just raise their prices, and now they're at $62 per year to register and renew your LLCs. It's a fantastic location. It's why we love it. Now, important though, separation, right? Separation is the name of the game. The Wyoming Holding LLC is the first step. Then you want the separation. You want to put the properties that you own, the businesses that you own, if they're passive, into LLCs in the state where they're located. Number one, for separation, don't keep all your eggs in the same basket, right? If there's a fire in one home, that in a home that's in your LLC, any other properties in the LLC are going to be subject to the same liability, right? Keep going. I'm not an arsonist, I promise. I'll think of a different accident for the next one. But the point stands, all of them, any assets you have in the LLC are going to be subject to liability. So we strongly recommend one LLC for each property. In addition, any LLC that operates or holds property has to register in the state where that's located. Well, Wyoming is anonymous, but most of the states are not. Indiana, Colorado is another one. Florida, Texas, these states, if you file for a business entity, you have to say who the owner is, and that is part of the public domain. But in this case, it's owned by the Wyoming Holding LLC and managed by the Wyoming Holding LLC. So that's the name that goes on the public domain. Still nothing that ties back to you, still full separation. Any accident is going to be limited to that one business, that one property. And then we've got up top here, the corporation, right? This is, as I mentioned, your tax mitigation tool. We're going to go into a little bit more detail on those later on when we talk specifically about tax mitigation. But we like having the active business over here in the corporation. None of the hard assets for multiple reasons, right? Because number one, this is your face. It's hard to be anonymous when you're running an active business because, well, you're running an active business. You're the one that's out there hitting the streets. You're marketing, you're talking to people, you're managing things. So it's hard to maintain pure anonymity. That's why it's a different color. This is not a owner-member relationship between the corporation and the Wyoming Holding LLC, but rather a contractual one, right? In the case of residential assisted living, for example, what we're talking about here today, you would run the business out of the corporation. That's the one that has the contract with the residents. That's the one that buys the assets, supplies. It runs the business, it's the face. But your Indiana LLCs, well, your Colorado LLCs will rent the properties to the corporation, and the corporation will sublease those to the individual residents. And that way, heaven forbid someone falls and breaks a leg. See, new accident. They fall and break a leg, they sue the corporation. What's at risk? The last few months' income, right? Because that's what the corporation owns, and that's all it owns. It doesn't own any hard assets, right? They don't have a contract. They don't have privity of contract, we call it. So standing, they don't have any connection with your Colorado LLCs, or don't even know about the Wyoming Holding LLCs. And so they can't get to those assets. They have no rights associated with them. The attorney's going to see that. We're going to focus on what's at play, the insurance, the income, and everybody moves on with their lives, right? Very strong protection, puts you in the driver's seat. Let's take a look. For example, this is in this structure. Let's say there's that not a fire, someone trips and falls, right? Skateboarding accident on the sidewalk. This is what your plaintiff attorney will see from the inside. Well, they see, okay, this is the property owners, your Indiana LLC, your Colorado LLC, and that is owned by the Wyoming LLC. Well, who owns that? Well, I don't know, because it's not public. And I can't force you to disclose that until and unless I go through this whole litigation process, years, hundreds of thousands of dollars, to see who owns it, right? You individually are the manager of that property, but there is no reason, there's no requirement to disclose what that is until unless you get a judgment. And again, it's just not worth the effort, right? Now, what happens if you individually get into a car accident, right? It's getting late at night. You had a really great time at that networking event, and you're driving home, get into an accident. Well, that attorney sees you and sees you, oh, coming from a network event, business person, let's see what they've got. Nothing, right? This is what they see, because we're going to put your primary residence in a land trust, not in your name anymore. All of your business assets are either going to be in corporations or these LLCs owned by the Wyoming Holding Company, which has no public touching on you individually. So they're going to look at this, they're going to see you, and they're going to tell their clients, this isn't worth it. They don't even have a home that I can see. And so either it means they're broke, they got nothing, or it means they are super sophisticated and everything they have is going to be hid behind layers upon layers. And this isn't, again, you're going to spend more on me than you're going to get back. Let's settle with insurance. Let's everybody, since we can, walk away, right? Really puts you in the driver's seat of any litigation and any disputes. Okay, awesome. Let's now move into taxation. And this is, I love at Anderson because it's your one-stop shop, right? We will help you with all of these aspects of this, right? You don't have to call your attorney and say, hey, what do you recommend? Well, I recommended this. And then call your CPA and say, oh, well, no, you can't do that because that's going to cost you tens or hundreds of thousands of extra tax dollars a year. And then you go back to your attorney and say, hey, they said this. Well, yeah, that's technically true, but you're really opening yourself to a lot of light. And you're spending more money on them trying to talk through you than is absolutely necessary. So we love housing that all under one roof so that it's managed. Now, the reality, though, there is a little bit of give and take, right? There's a good, better, best with regard to asset protection. And there's a good, better, best financially to tax mitigation. And our goal, again, it's not cookie cutter. We look at what you are doing to balance those scales, to accept a reasonable level of risk for both. But generally, we're getting into specifics because this is what I like, but we don't have time for that. So let's actually go into our next big concept. Failing to plan is planning to fail. There are so many idioms and sayings and effort. No, that's something else. That focus on this term, right? An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. This idea that understanding the end from the beginning will cut the path in half. And that is never more true than in the case of tax planning, for sure. So here are some of the three big mistakes, areas of interest, principles that I like to talk about when addressing tax and business issues. The first one is the wrong level of taxation. And most commonly what we see is these business owners that are out there pounding the streets. They're working really hard. They're managing 3 or 4. I talked to Fran. I was so impressed when you talked about your day and the level of care that you have for these residents was really impressed me in our breakout session. But you do that individually, right? You have all that business. You're so focused on taking care of people, you kind of forget to take care of yourself. And you run all of that down to your personal tax return, right? Treat it like a sole proprietorship, like a disregarded entity. And you don't look at when is an S Corp the right thing for me? When is a C corporation the right thing to me? What are the differences, right? And you end up overpaying, sometimes in the tens of thousands of dollars yearly, because you're too focused on your work and you haven't had someone look at specific that has their area of specialty being real estate or residential assisted living, or the interplay between small business and real estate, and how to manage and how to tie those two together, right? Again, the lack of planning. And in this one, I want to bring up specifically that, again, we spend 4 hours on this topic in some of our weekend webinars that, of course, we'd be more than happy to have you register for later if you're interested. But the people that get audited, if we drew, your pretty standard bell curve, the people that get audited or that are at risk from the IRS fall within a pretty narrow range. And so you've got the top, like 50% of audits happen to individuals between the range of, $500, $800,000 of income per year. And then 90%, widen it just a little bit more, 90% between the 250 and 250,000 per year gross income and 1 million per year gross income. Those are the people that are really get the stink eye from the IRS, right? Why? Well, because the IRS is a monster. No, they are a monster, but they're also a clever monster, right? This group, number one, has enough funds to make it worth it. And number two, doesn't have enough funds to make it a fight. For those people that are making more than $1 million in income, they've got an attorney, a CPA, or a team of attorneys and a team of CPAs, and the IRS is just not worth it to them, right? You'll see one case every 5 years, couple every decade of, we brought down this powerhouse and we collected all this evidence, because there are one or two, a handful of the really high level IRS teams that are looking for evidence, that are looking for the big cases to make an example of. But the majority is within that range, right? And below that, they're just, sure, they're probably not the best at filing their own taxes, but they're filing their own taxes. And it's a matter of a couple hundred, maybe a couple thousand in fees. But this group right here, they're probably not sophisticated enough to hire that, probably not profitable enough to hire a team of attorneys, a team of CPAs. And so if we can find a couple of key things, they're just going to pay the bill. Let's audit them, right? And so if you find yourself within that structure, within that bell curve, how do you get out of it? By proper tax planning, right? If we can split a quarter of that income to go to you individually, and then 3/4 of that income to go through a corporation that takes deduction after deduction and then pays W-2 to you individually, both of those, both you individually and your corporation, start to be on the tail end of this and get out of that crosshairs that the IRS is looking into, right? And that type of planning can help. And so not only are you getting out of the crosshairs, but by doing those deductions and by doing that tax planning, you're not spending so much. So it's this wonderful, wonderful situation where you're saving money on taxes and moving yourself out of the crosshairs of the IRS, keeping things safer, saving you money. It's a wonderful combination. Now, let's talk about lendability though, because it's hilarious to hear Toby and Clint talk about this. Toby and Clint are the two other partners that of Anderson formed it. They've been doing this for decades, real estate investing, asset protection, and they do it for themselves. And that's how they started. And they realized, oh, this is really working. We can do this as a service to those like us. But the first couple of years, they focused fully on this tax mitigation, and literally their tax bill was zero. Year number one, zero. Pop that champagne. We didn't pay any taxes. Year two, zero. Okay, now we need 2 bottles. Year 3, zero. Crap. Because now I've got all of these assets. I've got all of this equity. I can't do anything with it because the IRS thinks I'm a pauper. I'm not paying any taxes. But guess who else thinks that? Every other lender out there. Every bank, every financial institution, the first thing they're going to do is pull your tax returns. You make $0, friend. Sure, you've got a lot of equity, but you don't make any money with it. I'm not risking money on you. And that takes away a whole swath of lenders and really the best rates out there, because you're left with the hard money lenders, the not quite loan sharks, but those that are say, well, you're going to pay me instead of 4 to 6%, we're going to do 6 to 12%. And either I get my 6 to 12% or I get the home. So I'm great system for me, not so great for you. So with that planning, we want to minimize your taxes. We want to get you out of the crosshairs, but we also want to keep it so that you can use the equity in the businesses and the assets and the real estate that you've got for lendability. And so the entity choice matters, right? Having a C corporation, that may get you a little bit of double taxation. but then you pay yourself a W-2 rather than showing income as a loss or showing a very low income on your personal returns. That all happens through the corporation, and you've got a W-2 that is making income, and lenders love that. They love you, and you've got all sorts of avenue open for that rent, rehabilitate, refinance to continue your investing and to grow whether it be your residential homes, add a new home, take the equity out, add another one, this pattern of growth and development, right? So lendability is an important piece of that. We looked at the structure from the plaintiff's attorney, both inside and outside. Let's look at the structure from the IRS point of view, right? Because for them, a disregarded entity doesn't exist. It does for legal purposes. You're protected. You've got that. You know, we talked about insulation. But the IRS sees you based on tax return. And so if we have the Wyoming LLC and each of the individual Colorado property LLCs set up as disregarded entity down to your personal return, they just see those two things. They see the corporation that's running the active business, and they see you individually, right? And so those are the tax planning tools, right? We can maximize the number of deductions. We've got the 280A exemption. We've got the renting out your property, all of these different tax strategies that we can use, and then distribute and pay the remainder to yourself individually to increase that lendability. Maximize your deductions while minimizing your risk and still keeping you a viable lending candidate. Our process is easy, right? We start with the education. We want you to know what we're doing, why we're doing it, when we're doing it. We craft a blueprint. We put together all of these assets. We have a structure. We look at whether your assets are risky, active, passive. We separate all that out and we structure accordingly. And then we teach you how to make it actually useful, right? The more education to make sure that you're not breaching the corporate veil, that you keep your entity renewed with the state, that you are creating the proper meeting minutes, the director's resolution. It's an ongoing process. We're not a one-off services firm where we say hi and here you go and bye. We want to be there for the long run as you grow, as you develop, to keep the entities maintained, right? That's what we're all about. And so we will look at all of these different things for you individually, right? What type of taxes are you paying? How are you currently structured? Where can we improve on that? What kind of liability are you currently exposed to? Just this year, I had a residential assisted living entrepreneur in Texas. He joined us. He had, it was crazy. He had like 10 different facilities across Texas and a few up in Alabama, I believe, really aggressively expanded. Every single one of them owned in his personal name, all of it taxed on his individual return. And it was amazing what happened when we sat down with him. We talked him through this whole process. We ended up setting up, I think, 13 in the end, 13 different entities, LLCs, corporations, and trusts. And he ended up saving, I think the final number was saving $275,000 in taxes that year. We just love, well, we hate to see it, but we love to be able to help in all types of situations. And so whether you're at that level, whether you're just starting out, whether you've got a few properties mixed in with different entities, we have clients that come in never having heard the term LLC before. And we have clients coming in that have the whole structure already in place and they just want someone to help keep it compliant, everything in between. Our focus first is education, then setting up your blueprint and structure to protect you, and then that ongoing process of improvement and maintaining what you've got. As part of what we're offering here is a free 45-minute individualized session. So rather than a Zoom, you'll get with one of our senior strategists and they will go over your details, talk to you about everything that you've got going on, what assets you have, what strategies we can employ to both minimize your taxes and to maximize your legal protection. if you're interested, feel free to click on that link. That'll get you in touch with our team and get you scheduled. This is both no cost and no commitment. So if you're interested, we'd love to talk to you more. You're not going to spend a dime until you decide, you know what, this is the program for me. And if not, it's a really good further informational and planning session that is tailored to your needs rather than a more general and high level. Thank you so much. Again, I think we're right about that time period, but I really appreciate getting to know you, being part of those breakout sessions. I do have some time. If we've got any questions, then, oh, thank you so much. Both Vern and Renee, it looks like linked, put that link into the chat as well. And then any questions we can, if you want to type those into the chat, or we can do the hand raise, or if not, it's been great to get to know you and meet you a little bit.
I'll start with a question.
Yeah.
On the land trust, how does that prevent accelerating the mortgage?
Oh, that's a great question. So what it is that the vast majority of mortgages are by financial institutions, or backed by Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, right? And they have very specific legislation and statutes that they have to follow. One of those being that any individual is allowed to transfer their property into a revocable living trust, grantor trust, which is what a land trust is, without triggering an acceleration. By law, you can do that. And so the land trust is just that. You transfer it from your individual name into the land trust. Initially, you're the beneficiary. A land trust is not a public document. So they see that transition, and it's still in your personal name. It follows the letter of the law, and is a grantor revocable trust, and so is an exception to that. This allows them from accelerating. And then once we've transferred that to the land trust, we can change the beneficiary from you to your LLC. That's not something that the bank will ever see. As long as payments are made properly, there can be no acceleration because we followed the letter of the law.
Wow, I like that. I actually have two of them I want to do then. I was going to put it into an LLC, but I'd rather have it in a trust.
It's a very, very commonly used structure in order to avoid exactly that. Now, the reality is that most 80–90% of the time, moving it into the LLC is going to be the same thing, right? Banks very, very rarely are monitoring the state filings in the county for the trust deeds. And as long as and especially as long as they're getting paid, they're not going to look at that, right? They're in the business of collecting rent payments, not foreclosures. And so moving it directly into an LLC, most of the time, you're going to be just fine anyway. But the land trust really seals the deal that even if you've had issues with your lender, if there's red flags, if they've said, no, you can't move it into an LLC, by law, they have to allow you move it into the land trust. And that funnels into the LLC that offers that insulation, that separation and protection.
Great. Do we have any other questions?
No, but I did just sign up for my session.
Thanks, Renee.
Mhm.
So this is Wendell Gates. So you got me a little nervous. So I started my own several LLCs thinking I was protected. But money flowing, I think my accountant takes care of that. But for example, yeah, when you said go to McDonald's or something, then you pull it out, that's happened several times, of course. And is there a length of time that they look back, or if I stop right now, does that protect me, or do I have to wipe everything out and start a whole new company and a whole new bank account in order to clean that up?
Oh, that's a really good question, Wendell. And definitely my focus is not to make people afraid. So in your particular scenario and situation, most likely you're not going to have to start from scratch, right? What judges will look at, usually it's on average a 3 to 5 year period that they're going to go back and look and see how the accounts are held. If you have an accountant, a professional that's running those accounts, oftentimes they won't look deeper than that. They'll say, hey, no, they've got an accountant. They've got separate books for their business and their personal, and that's enough for me. An LLC especially is designed for the small business owner. So you're going to have to work a little bit in order to pierce that corporate veil. It's got to be pretty excessive. If you go to McDonald's a couple times a year and that's the only time you're using business funds for personal use, judge isn't going to care. If you're going to McDonald's every week, every day, using the personal funds, if you treat them as the same, if you treat the business account and the business credit card as your personal card for everything, that's when you're getting in trouble. So it's a bit of a sliding gray scale of here, once or twice a year, I do it just for convenience. Judge is not going to care. Every day, every week, that's going to look like commingling. That's going to be a problem. And so there's a bit of that sliding scale here. If you stop and transition, courts can see that too, and they're going to take that into consideration.
Okay.
So in your case, probably going to be okay, but it is something to be careful of, to be aware of, and try to minimize that into the future.
See, I'm balancing the books today, checking
Okay.
account.
Yep.
And I noticed a year and a half ago, I increased my own home mortgage, the value that I'm paying them. And it looks like for some stupid reason, I changed accounts and it's coming out of my business account. But I noticed last year that my accountant has moved it out of the books. So he must have been doing something so it doesn't show that my home mortgage is coming out of the business. But I just noticed that. I got to talk to him and say, okay, what are you doing and how do I can go in and change the account right now. But you see,
right.
What you said, I'm going, okay, I got to clean things up, I think. So
For sure.
It's doable then.
It's absolutely doable. And again, just the fact that you have that professional there is going to go a long ways, particularly paired with the LLC that has less corporate formalities than a corporation is going to have. Your accountant is probably helping you in the bookkeeping side to allocate those between the business and personal. But yes, the more careful you are, the more protection you've got. And that is a pattern that a judge can see, and that is going to be persuasive to the judge that, hey, I made this change 6 months, a year, 2 years ago, and it's been clean since then.
Okay.
Right. They're not going to use that little mistake to generate a lot of liability. Judges try to be contrary to individual and anecdotal evidence. Judges they're people, they make mistakes, but they try their best, and they'll see patterns like that.
Okay.
Hey, Jason, I got a quick question. Regarding cost, can you give a range of a guy has a house and he wants to put it in a land trust, and what does that cost to set up and maybe maintain each year?
Sure. Yeah. And that can be, so there's a wide range of that cost if you're asking generally. But the general maintenance costs are going to be the initial creation. So it's going to be anywhere from a couple $100 if you do LegalZoom to a couple $1,000 for most average firms, to upwards of $10,000, $15,000 if you use large firms for the initial creation. Trusts are not publicly filed or registered, so you have no annual fees there. Depending on how many LLCs you're setting up, you'll have anywhere between, like I mentioned, $60, $70 up to a couple $100 per year per entity in annual fees for the LLCs that you're going to set up. And from there, depending on how it's structured tax-wise, If they're disregarded to your personal return, no additional fees there. But if you do have a corporation, then that's going to have, or if you have it structured as a partnership, if you want you and your spouse, for example, on any of the structure, most often the Wyoming Holding LLC level, then that is going to be an additional tax return, a 1065 that needs to be prepared there. So that's ballpark range, what you're looking at per entity.
So with Anderson, it might be a couple grand to set up one trust for one property.
Right, in that range. Yeah,
Okay.
that's pretty accurate.
That's fair enough. Good, thanks.
We do have a couple questions in the chat.
Oh, I missed those. Thank you. Let's go back and see. So from Jared. So I do all my work meetings at McDonald's, in fact, often sit there for their well-regarded office space compared to sitting at the kitchen table. I love it. I thought those were legit business expenses. So what is a business expense in this regard for a meal, entertainment, or home expense? You make a very good point, Jared. That is true. My McDonald's scenario is you're taking your family out and you're watching your kids in that just disgusting ball pit, having a fun time and never knowing the incredible dangers they're facing. That's a personal expense. That's not something that you want involved with your business. If you're spending time at McDonald's and you're using their Wi-Fi to research, to prepare your books, to prepare memos, running your business, if you're inviting clients over, residents, potential residents, marketers, that's a business expense. Totally fine. In fact, you want to run that and fund that through your business account and use it as a deduction. The courts will then look at the primary purpose behind the meeting. If it's business, pay for it with your business credit card. If it's personal, pay for it with your personal credit, debit card, or cash from your bank account, etc. So that is a really good distinction that you make, and you're right, Jared, that those can and should be business accounts if they are reasonably related to business needs and business expenses. And then if they're personal, if you're just going out with your family, they need to come out of your personal account.
So with that scenario, how do you handle going to Anaheim, staying at a hotel with your family because there's a reason to be in Anaheim, Disneyland, but you legit have 2 work meetings at the hotel at night after your kids are asleep, where people you legitimately do business with come there, do a meeting, you sit at the hotel bar. Can you write off one night at the hotel, the miles down, or is that just too obvious of a thing?
We're looking at another sliding scale there. And so if you ask 4 different attorneys and 5 different CPAs, you're going to get 9 different answers on that question, right? It's one of those, how much risk am I willing to take? The 2 key pieces of advice that we like to give is, what's the primary purpose? Are you in Anaheim for these business meetings? You're probably going to be okay counting them as business expense. Are you in Anaheim to go to the beach, to go to Disney, to eat some just incredible food? You're going to have to look at that and then decide on how much risk you're willing to take on. And then the reasonability. If you go to Anaheim and you do these business and you write off the hotel bill that you had to pay because you were at those businesses and you needed a hotel for yourself, and the meals that you spent and took the time doing with your business partners, you're going to be in a much better spot than also trying to write off the Disneyland and the parks and the museums and the parties that you attended with your family all lumped together. So you want to be smart about it. You want to be careful about it. I'm an attorney, so I tend to be much more risk averse. And so I try to stay on the safer side of those. But as long as they're reasonable and their principal purpose is the business, then you're going to be fine writing those off and listing those as business expenses paid out of the business account. Great follow-up on that one, Jared.
I want to throw in a quick little piece of advice that I've discovered, because I have a lot of business meetings, and I use an app on my phone called Everlance, and it actually does a couple things. One is it tracks all of my mileage of every trip that I take. So I can go back and just
Excellent.
say this is business and this is personal. But the second part is when I go out to eat, I can add expenses to that. I put in there reason I'm there for real estate and the client I met with and what we talked about. And then I take a photo of that receipt. And then at the end of the year, come the end of last year, I was able to download a spreadsheet of all my trips and all my expenses and a PDF of every single receipt that I'd taken a photo of.
Vern's CPA is so happy to have Vern as a client. That's a great
All right.
suggestion. Our tax attorneys and our tax filers, we often recommend the same thing. We use QuickBooks. QuickBooks does have a mobile app, but any of those apps that are going to put together and distinguish and spit out that type of report and spreadsheet, very valuable tool. And keeping track and not missing things and not forgetting things. Absolutely. Great suggestion. The next question down from Jordan, is commingling the most common way to pierce the veil? Yeah. Yeah, by far, especially in this demographic for the small business owner. The two easiest way to pierce the corporate veil or to lose the benefit of the LLC, commingling and failure to fund. So what this means is you create the LLC, you've got the land trust, all tied to the Wyoming LLC, you've got the bank accounts, everything set up, and you never deed the property into the land trust. That is a very expensive set of documents sitting on your table, doing you zero good. You have to fund. So anytime there is any asset that has a paper title, it needs to be in the name, titled in the name of whatever entity or trust or structure that you're setting up and out of your personal name. Otherwise, this does no good at all. Another one of our focuses is, again, making it real, making it effective for you. And so those two are the number two ways that our clients come to us with issues that we help them resolve and make it effective. From Mitch, can you explain how a living trust would be used in your scenarios? Excellent. I'm going to actually go back. See if I can find my handy dandy structure to show, because this is a great question. Here we go. So the living trust is going to be a little gray box that surrounds the two individuals on this structure. So that way, everything funnels down to your living trust. Living trust not going to provide asset protection. It's not an insulator. It's a grantor revocable trust. But because you are going to put your properties into their LLCs and you are going to have the corporation contracted with the Wyoming LLC, and if the Wyoming LLC is owned or assigned, its beneficial interest is assigned to the living trust where the little happy couple there is, everything then will flow to that living trust automatically. None of it's going to go through probate. All of it is going to be easily managed, both when you pass on and in the event of incapacity, a coma, dementia, Alzheimer's, situations like that. So that's where the living trust fits into that structure, so that all of your assets automatically flow down to that living trust. We also, what I would add is a little green box off to the left of that living trust of that couple for your primary residence. We don't want that attached to an LLC most of the time, because the LLC voids your homestead exemption, both the asset protection piece of the homestead exemption and the tax exemption, the capital gains exemption for when you sell or refinance or such for your primary residence. So that's another thing to be aware of that's not listed on this more general information.
So Jason, if we're talking about that primary residence.
Yeah.
Would be another green box. Would that have an arrow going to the Wyoming LLC?
It would not. That would be the type of scenario that would void your homestead exemption, because the land trust, again, the trusts aren't a separable thing, right? They're the anonymity piece, but it's a flow through entity, both for taxes and for asset protection. So if that land trust is owned by an LLC, The IRS is going to say, no, 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 no. An entity owns this property. By definition, it can't be a primary residence. You don't get the homestead exemption, and you don't get the asset protection or tax benefits associated with the homestead exemption.
So that'd
So
just
it
be in
would-
a little conversation bubble over by itself.
Exactly. The little arrow from the green land trust would go to the individual couple or their living trust, whichever they're using. Renee White, I haven't purchased a property yet for the residential assisted living. I also have a foundation. When would I start talking to Anderson for asset protection? Right now. Yes, this is the perfect time, because we want these structures set up before the purchase, but not way before, if that makes sense. There's no reason to be paying the entity creation fees and the annual renewals and the extra tax filings, if applicable, for this structure if you're not going to buy for another 2 or 3 years. Doesn't make sense. There's no need to do that. But we do want it set up before you buy, so that rather than buy in your personal name and have your personal name attached forever in the public domain with that property, your name is never associated with it, and it is owned directly in this structure in the Colorado LLC, if that's where you're investing, owned by the Wyoming Holding LLC, and you maintain that pure, full anonymity. This is, we get lots of questions on this, so I'll address this up front. If you are doing personal financing, it's going to be inevitable that it's going to be in your personal name. You're going to finance it. You're going to use your personal credit. You're going to get a much better rate. And so this is one of those areas where reality and best practices for legal protection kind of clash a little bit. And for most, it's worth the financial benefits of that personal financing. But what we do in that case is that you buy the property, you finance it in your personal name, you close, and then a couple of months after that's done, any transferring of servicers taken care of, any final escrow payments are all done, then we transfer it into the LLC so that it looks more like a flip, right? It's not a long-term home. You bought it, you sold it, right? Your name was on it, but then a LLC not tied to you at all is the new owner. Looks like a flip, doesn't look like it's related to you or owned by you anymore. So still get substantial, you still get the full asset protection, pretty substantial anonymity, and the financial benefit of using your personal credit and residential loans of sometimes a very significantly lower interest rate.
Jim or Vern, can they avoid that by doing the lease option through us and buying in their entity name instead of their personal name?
Jim, you want that?
I know he had to answer a call earlier. Is he still here?
Well, he's here, but he may have stepped away or he's muted. So, yeah, when they buy from us, they, most of the time, there's going to be a commercial loan. So they could do it in their LLC, and that's usually what we see.
Excellent, right? Then you get a bit of the best of both of the worlds, it sounds like.
Thanks, Vern.
All right, I am running up on my time. Any last questions that I can help out with today? Well, thank you again. I really appreciate you having me here with a great group. It's really nice to be introduced to all of you, and I certainly hope to see several of you take advantage of that link. Again, that's in the chat. If you need it again, I can post it again. And thank you for your time, and hope you have a wonderful evening.
Thank you very much, Jason. It was very, very informative.
Yes, thank you, Jason. Don't forget to
Oh.
save your chat.
Okay, so we're pretty much wrapped up, but we do reserve a couple minutes at the end for haves and wants. If anybody has a have or want that they want to present to the group, this could be a service, a partnership opportunity, something for sale. This is your opportunity to express it. So do we have any haves or wants tonight? Okay, doesn't look like it. All right, well, as I mentioned, I do leave this forum open for networking until everybody's gone. So I just step away and let you guys hang out and chat as much as you'd like. Again, make sure that you put your information down in the chat button, and you can print out your the file with everybody's info. And for that, we appreciate everybody coming out tonight. And fortunately, the drive is not too tough for you, I hope, and the parking was easy. And thanks again for attending. We will see you next month.
See you later. Hey, Tola.
All right.
Thanks.
Hi, Renee. Hello.
How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you.
Very good. It's so nice to see you on here.
Thank you. Hello, everyone.
All right, I'll see you guys later.